Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Courtside with Beilinson Tennis. As always, I'm joined by my co-host and Hall of Famer, Steve Flink. Start of the Sunshine Double is upon us. Hopefully any food poisoning issues that were in some previous tournaments are now behind all the players, especially we're talking about Acapulco because that was a mess right there. For the listeners, we are recording this at around 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And for all tennis fans, especially American tennis fans, the Sunshine Double is great because you have beautiful Indian Wells. Then after this, you go over to Miami. Two Masters 1000 events. All the top guys usually play. Not everyone goes over to Miami, as we've seen in the past, but for the most part, you get the best players playing both those events.
Yeah, no, it's a great time of the year, and it's there's a little bit of a break because it's tough on the players. They need that little window after Indian Wells before starting in Miami the next weekend, or it'd be impossible. But it's and the nice part is around the corner. We know the clay court circuit is starting, so this is when the year sort of starts accelerating from hard to the clay, and then before you know it, we'll be past Roland Garros and heading for Wimbledon. So I like this stretch.
Well said, Steve. I'm going to start with three players on the ATP side. You could say, I don't know if controversial is the right word, but there's maybe some really serious fan base pros and cons to these players. So we'll start with the first one, and that's Nick Kyrgios, and say whatever you want to say about certain things that he acts or does things that are immature and whatnot. No one can deny his talent on the court, and he's an incredible talent. And watching him play his first match back now since he tried in Australia when he defaulted, um, his wrist is bothering him, Steve. You could see it. Even when he got through that first set, he was constantly wiggling his wrist around during the first set. He got through the first set. He lost 7-6, and then I think he was down 3-0 in the second set, and he defaulted. Steve, we're getting to the point now where, maybe doubles if he wants to do that, but it's not looking good for him to play competitive singles anymore, as of
No,
what we've recently seen.
yeah, no, listen, I watched him. We compared notes a little bit after that match by text. It was actually very painful to watch because you could see he was acting out the way Nick can with all the banner and saying things to his corner, but then you understood this was not one of his episodes where he's just venting and angry at his situation. He was upset because the wrist was so painful, and I thought it was bothering him even in the first set, which he came back from two breaks down against the Dutchman Bodek van Sterkolp, and he did very well to make it a close tiebreak in the first set before going down 3-11 in the second and retiring. So you could see he was wincing a lot, especially early in the second. And I agree with you. It's looking kind of bleak. I think maybe he needs to take a little more time off again, see if it can heal, and give the grass court campaign one more try. Obviously, it was 22 Wimbledon where he had his best major ever to get to the finals and lose to Djokovic. So I feel like he'll want to at least take it that far. But if it starts acting up again and he has to pull out of Wimbledon, I wonder how much longer he's going to want to put up with it before he tries to figure out another professional avenue. And obviously he's got the commentary already, but there may be other options for him as well. Too bad, because he finally started getting more serious a couple of years ago before the wrist required the surgery, and he was
And he
more.
mentioned that, Steve. He said he's thinking back to 2022 and he just doesn't know if he can get back to that. And people, they all remember the Wimbledon final that he played so well. You remember the US Open, he had a good run too. He lost a five-setter to what was it, Hatchinoff, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
he
he
make a
played well.
deep
He played
run
really
in that
well.
in that
Yeah, he
run.
did. But that's my point. Yeah, that during that stretch, you saw for the first time and a sustained commitment. And he was playing the most consistent tennis of his career. Had a couple wins over Medvedev, including at the Open, and he was really playing well. And now you see maybe part of the reason he's so understandably dismayed by it all is that he looks back and maybe wishes earlier in his 20s when maybe if only he would have put in a fuller effort then what might have happened. But I think it's too bad because obviously the fans have come to enjoy him when he's playing well, and we might not ever see it again.
Well, you mentioned Botic Van de Sandschulp. I'm trying really hard to say that
The
correctly.
tough name.
Funny stat.
We'll
Funny
call him.
stat with him. He's the last player. He's the last player to beat Novak, last player to beat Rafa, and he beat Carlos in the U.S. Open. So he's had some serious good wins. Now
Yeah.
he hasn't had amazing results, but if you look at those three players, he's had some great results.
No, he's been lodged down at 85 in the world because he doesn't. He loses to so many other guys. He lost in the qualifying here. He's
Yeah.
second round of the qualifying. He's beaten, and he's got in as a lucky loser. Had the good fortune against Kyrgios, though. Who's to say he might not have won that match anyway? And then he beats Novak in 3 sets. It was kind of an odd 3-setter, though, David, because obviously Novak had a bye, and so he hadn't played since he'd lost that in his last tournament to Berrettini in his opening match, and seemed fine physically, but he lost the first set 6-2, lost 5 games in a row at one stage, won the second set, won the first game of the third, loses five more. He goes through a 5-game sequence at the end and loses the match, decisively in 3 sets. So, it was a tough go for him. He held his serve to start the third and lost 5 games in a row and got the match was over. And so I feel like it wasn't the best of Novak that we saw, and he just didn't seem to have much spark. He was trying, but this is a guy you don't want to be off against, this big Dutchman. What amazed me about him in that match, by the way, I have to say, I've never seen anybody return Djokovic's first serve as consistently as he did anybody. I mean, Djokovic got 80% of his first serves in the third set, and to no avail. It got him nowhere. And because Bodic's first serve returns were coming back so deep, if Djokovic didn't locate that serve perfectly, there was no way he'd get a free point on his first serve. And then that combined with the fact that he was bothered by the high bouncing court, he mentioned afterwards, didn't use it to say that that's why he lost, but he did say that stadium court, the bounce is much higher than it is anywhere else on the grounds. And that was throwing his timing off. He felt like he had no rhythm as a result. And Botic, the Dutchman, he did say afterwards himself that he thought he benefited from playing Kyrgios, having had a match more used to the conditions. So look, all power to him. He played beautifully, but it's Djokovic. It's going to be interesting to see whether he decides to play Miami or waits for the clay. But to go, I don't think he ever envisioned leaving the Australian Open, healing, and then in his next 2 tournaments not winning a match. So he's on a 3-match losing streak, which is astounding for him. We'll see where it goes.
And to continue about someone who played well in Australia and is struggling right now, similar to Novak, is Sasha Zverev. I mean, he hasn't won 2 matches in a row in quite some time, too. And again, he played well. He made the finals of Australia. So,
But that was a great match, I have to say. That one, the difference was, yes, he didn't play great, and he said he's playing badly. I think that's an exaggeration. But Griekspoor, who's come so close against him in the past, it was a wild end of the third set where Griekspoor had this marathon 9-deuce game, 5-match points for Griekspoor. He can't put him away, and then they go to 4-all in the tiebreak, and Griekspoor wins the last 3 points to edge out Zverev. So that's been true of a lot of his matches. He's been in them. He's come agonizingly close to winning these matches, as he did on the clay after Australia, but he's just not winning, so he's down on himself. But Griekspoor, who just come off another really good win in his previous outing against Medvedev, is now starting to believe against the better players. It's nice to see that because he's entertaining to watch. He attacks a lot, goes forward a lot. He's a little bit different from the rest of the pack.
just continues to show the depth of how many great players there are on the tour. Let's flip over to the WTA side. We'll talk about 3 Americans, and the first one being the Australian Open champion. So nice to see her back, Madison Keys, and I'm so happy she took some time off. Like, you don't want to rush after winning your first Grand Slam. All the emotions that go to that, Steve, like you don't want to rush it. Take it in, absorb it all, get back to good habits, practicing, and then see, going forward. Now, again, you never know how players will react. They may be now more of a target. They may feel some pressure. We'll see how that goes. She won her first match easy, but I was really happy that she didn't rush and just play events just to play events. Like, take your time after that incredible achievement that you just had.
Yeah, no, she did. She played really well. It was nice that she got that first one out of the way. It was a really easy straight set win for Keys, and it's an exciting time in American women's tennis to have Keys and Pegula and Coco. They're all in the top 5 together, We haven't seen anything like this in 20 years, more than 20, I think 22 years. And so I think they're going to spur each other on. And I think Keys is going to, I think she's going to handle wear that success well. I think she's going to realize it's all a bonus now. She doesn't need to look at this like she's some kid on her way up who has to prove herself.
That's such a good point, Steve. It's not like she's 18, 19 years old that
Right.
did it. She's older and more mature and has been around the block a lot. So I think that's a really well stated point you make there.
Yeah. And I hope that's how she's thinking. Because if she is, I think she'll take the pressure off herself and enjoy and realize that she's capable of doing something like that again. But that if she doesn't, as she said in Australia, if she doesn't, it's like, okay, no reason to beat yourself up. You finally got a major, and now you're 30 years old, and it's okay. Just play the best you can. But I definitely don't put it past her to win another. Frankly, I still say, we discussed this after the Australian Open. I still say the U.S. Open is going to be her best chance. I mean, Wimbledon, she could do well. Paris, she's been in the semis there before. She could do well, but I
She
feel like
did
the
well
Open.
this past Wimbledon before she got hurt. She was going to beat, I think it was Paulini she played,
Yes,
right?
yes, right,
Yeah.
right, exactly. But I'm just saying, I think by the Open, imagine what those crowds are going to be like, who've seen her for so long and appreciated her for so long, and now she's a Grand Slam champion, and she will have a degree of support that she's never had before. It'll be louder. It'll be really animated when she plays. She's gonna enjoy those New York crowds.
You got me thinking of New York already. We got a long way to go before we get there, but I'm getting pumped to see it. Um, Two other Americans, and boy, I mean they're squeaking by it. Coco Gauff wins her first match, 7-6 in the third, and then Emma Navarro. I mean this kid's incredible. She's down 3-5, double match point. She won, remember, like three or four matches in Australia when she could have easily lost
Right,
any one of
right.
those three or four matches. It's great that she's getting through, but there's got to be some concern there. Like you're not going to always be on the winning side of those.
No, that's true, but I think she's trying to look at the positive end. Is that she's winning on as she said last night. She didn't think she played that well, and so she's proud of herself for finding ways to win on when things aren't going well. And to be down 5-3, 40-15 double match point against somebody as good as Kirstea, I mean that was a heck of a win. And what made it even more remarkable, then she still had to serve to stay in the match in the next game in hell. Then they have a marathon 12-minute game, and Cristea holds. And finally, uh, Navarro holds her serve to get into the breaker, and then she completely outplayed her in the breaker. And so I just felt like it was a very gritty win. She'll take it. And I agree with you. Hopefully, one of these days, we see some 3-4 wins and some 5-2 wins and some 4-4 wins that are straight sets, but where she wins more comfortably. I think it's bound to happen because this is all recent. This is all in 2025. That wasn't necessarily the case last year. She won some matches more decisively.
Right. And then Coco, after the US Open last summer, she had that incredible run late fall to finish out the year. It's been a little dicey. I'm glad she got through 7-6 in the third. I hope she gets back to her good form and can win more decisively and make deep runs in both Indian Wells and Miami.
Yeah, so do it was a little worrisome though to see 21 double faults, reminiscent of the 19 she served when she lost to Navarro at the U.S. Open, and the forehand was faltering again. I honestly thought that when she went to Daly last for her new coach, that he had gone to work in those two areas that we've always discussed. Coco's forehand and her serve, but she seems now to be prone to she's drifted backwards a little bit as of late in those two departments. It's worrisome. She got through it, but she was almost on the verge of tears near the end because she couldn't serve the match out a couple of times, and she finally squeaked through in the final set tiebreak. So I hope Coco can find her best form again. We haven't seen it since the very beginning of the season when she won 9 matches in a row.
All right, some matches that are happening today. Tommy, there's some good. The lineup is good today. I mean, you're starting to see some heavy hitters going up against each other. Tommy Paul beat Cam Norrie in straight sets, 6-3, 7-5. Tommy, remember in Dallas, he lost, I think, in the quarters. He had some agitation with his shoulder, pulled out of Del Rey, went to Acapulco, had some food poisoning among
Yeah.
many other players too. So he's looking to get back into the swing of things. Good win over Cam Norrie. Cam's not an easy player to play against. Right now, you have Matteo Berrettini playing Stefano Tsitsipas. You got Alex Mickelson versus Medvedev, and then Danielle Collins versus Svitolina. So you're starting to get to the meat. It's still early in the tournament, but when I say the meat of the tournament, when you're getting heavyweights playing heavyweights here.
Yeah, well, let's just focus on Tommy for a minute. I mean, it's very encouraging. Tommy's another guy that can get himself involved in unnecessarily long matches.
Yes.
He's looking in really good form so far as we speak through this Cam Norrie match, and the draw has opened up to the point where it wouldn't be a bit shocked to see him in the final if he can keep playing at this level. So, and then you have Tsitsipas, who, as we speak, is up a set against Berrettini, and he's come off winning a tournament in Dubai, and he's got his confidence back. It's an exciting time because when you take Novak out and you take Zverev out, Carlos remains the big favorite, David, because of winning the last 2 years where, he won both times over Medvedev in the finals. He played some of his best tennis on these courts. Now, it's a slightly different hard court this year, but the players are not in unison about whether it's faster or slower or that different. And so it still looks very favorable to Carlos for me. But there's so many other guys now with opportunities given what's happened in the draw.
And you remember last year, this one, Tommy Paul, he made the semis and was playing
Yeah.
Daniil Medvedev great,
Yeah.
and he turned his ankle in a tiebreaker. He was
Yeah.
really close to winning that match. Then he re-aggravated it in Miami. So
and he might play him again. Depending on how things pan out here in the next few days, he might get another crack at Medvedev. And I must say, going in this year on current form, given what Medvedev, I'm not saying that Tommy is a huge favorite, but I would make him a slight favorite.
Yeah. That would be interesting when Tommy likes playing here in the States. So if that rematch happens, that'll definitely be interesting. Before we leave Indian Wells, I want to bring up one other topic that I know you have some thoughts on. The next time we do this will probably be very, very late stages of the tournament, if not the winner. With Novak out, with Zverev, is this Carlos's to lose, or you really feel like there's still several guys who could win this tournament?
There are, but I still make Carlos. To me, he's the clear favorite, just because of it's been his place. It's been of the 1000s. It's been where he's played his best so far in his young career. And again, the courts appear to me to playing not that fast, and Carlos likes this speed of hardcore. So I still make him the clear favorite. But if for some reason he stumbles, and then somebody picks him off, then there are 5 or 6 other guys. So it should be an exciting conclusion to the tournament.
And we mentioned, no Novak, no Zverev, obviously no Sinner too. So it's not like
Right.
we forgot his name, but he's not playing it either. All right. On a sad note, one of the legends of the game, and I know from a historical perspective, will have, some thoughts on this as well. Fred Stolle passed away last week. And I remember Fred, for me, growing up as a young teenager, it was Fred and Cliff Drysdale. It was Fred and Cliffy on ESPN. Sometimes you had Patrick McEnroe or some other on-court correspondent in the tournaments, but to me it was always Fred and Cliffy, and they were great. And I saw Cliff make a statement on social media about it, and they were so good together. And just reading the tributes to Fred Stolle, not a bad word was out there by anyone. Obviously, no one would say it at this point when he passed away, but when you read it, it is truly genuine how great a person he was and how much he contributed to the sport of tennis.
Well, listen, I met him for the first time when I was at a tennis camp in Pennsylvania, called the Chase Tennis Camp in Pennsylvania, when I was 15 in 1967. And just brief introduction. Then I got to know him really quite well in the 70s. And we used to work together closely on instruction pieces that he'd write for World Tennis Magazine. And it was kind of a running joke between us that those were the days before the internet and before cell phones, and I somehow would find him from my office in New York. I'd call him and track him down all over the world, wherever he might be playing or commentating. And we had a lot of fun working on those instruction pieces. And I was around him at other times. We served on Hall of Fame committees together. So I knew him really quite well. And Fred, I mean, listen, all of those Australians have very strong character traits. Laver's and Rosewall both very understated. Newcomb is a gregarious, terrific personality. But there's no doubt that Stolle was in that group. Probably the common ground was they all thought he was the most congenial. He was just so well liked by everybody and very candid with his opinions. He'd tell you things to your face that you might not like to hear, but you'd accept it because it was coming from him and he was being honest. And then he'd also be very generous with his praise. So yeah, his reputation was hard earned, well deserved as just a really great man. Now he wasn't Laver or Rosewall or Roy Emerson with who was his big buddy, and they had breakfast together before playing the Wimbledon finals against each other. And by the way, first Wimbledon final I ever saw, Fred Stolle versus Roy Emerson, 1965. First row, right in line with the baseline on the side of the court.
Wow.
What an experience that was as a 13-year-old. But he won the French championships. He won the U.S. That was a great win for him in '66 at the U.S. championships, unseeded. He was not happy with the seeding committee. No computer rankings back then. It was done by a committee. He felt they'd overlooked him. And he beat a lot of top players, including Newcomb in the finals. And so Fred, well, although he was not the equal of Emerson and certainly not of Laver or Rosewall or Lou Holt or some of the gigantic Australians, he was a great player, more along the lines of Tony Roach. You know, you could debate about which one of those was the greatest player, but Fred was just incredibly well liked and deservedly so.
And you could tell that along, going a little bit more recent with the commentating too. I mean, everybody liked working with him and
Oh yeah, no, they
joy to
did.
listen to.
They did, and he did especially a lot in the '70s through up until say the late '90s. That was his best work. There's a 20-year stretch probably where he was regarded as one of the best commentators. And he continued doing it a lot even after he left ESPN, he still had some other work for other networks. But yeah, he was right to the point with his remarks, and you knew where he stood, and a very, very good analyst, as I knew just from doing those instruction pieces with him when he would start picking apart players and giving tips. He had a great tennis mind.
Well, thanks, Steve, for sharing your thoughts on that. I knew when I said, "Hey, we got to talk about Fred," I was looking forward to hearing what you'd say about him because he was a legend. He surely was a legend, and he'll be missed. So, with that, as we wrap this up, again, the next one we do, we'll recap the latter stages of Indian Wells, both on the men and women's side. Should be a great week of tennis, Steve. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, so am I. I hope the weather stays warm. They had some very cold weather there for a few days, and it's changed the last 2 days as we speak. And it's been sunny and warmer, and the tennis has come alive. You know, one quick reference before we go was terrific match between Korda and Monfils that went to a couple
Yes.
of tie breaks last night. Just first-rate tennis. And watching Monfils, 38, I guess he is now. I mean, it's just phenomenal how well he's moving, how well he's playing, how motivated he is. And he used to be a bit mercurial. You didn't know sometimes whether he was just going to give up on the court at times or come up lame physically, but he seems in the best place of his life psychologically, and he's played so well all year, and he's won a tournament, and he's just revitalized, and he played a great match to beat Korda.
Yeah, him and Grigor, the late resurgence in their career, Grigor and Gael has been unbelievable. Now, Korda again, he's not always now in the conversation of Tommy, Taylor, Francis, but let's not give up on him. He's just had a
No,
rough deal with injuries, and he's got talent. The kid just has to stay healthy.
no, it was high level. He lost a really high quality match, and he had some chances. He got up a break in the second set and wasn't able to sustain. He had a 4-2 lead and then served a couple of doubles in the next game and got broken. But his ground game looked terrific, and the rallies were really first rate. And I don't think he should come away that disappointed by the loss. He played very well in defeat.
Well, thanks, Steve. Thank you for this time. This was fun, and like I said, the next one we'll recap the tournament as it should be concluded by the time we record. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, David.